Discover the amazing transformation. A lone rancher's surprising love for an invaluable young girl. Hank Collins stood with his weathered hands on his hips, the relentless Montana sun casting long shadows across his family ranch. The land, once vibrant with laughter and filled with aspirations, now felt like a tomb of dreams unfulfilled. At 52, his rough-hewn face echoed the battles of a life spent in toil. But today, as he mended fences under the scorching horizon, a different fight stirred within him, a struggle against the suffocating silence that filled his days since losing his wife. The ranch slipped further from promise and into despair. As he nailed a post into the ground, a shadow passed under the blinding sun. He glanced up, half expecting to see a wandering calf, but met the curious gaze of Lily, a scrappy girl wearing patched-up clothes and wild hair, her presence as unexpected as a sudden storm. She stood there, a wildflower amidst dry brush, her fierce determination sparking a mix of irritation and intrigue inside him. Why was she here? Couldn't she see he was trying to maintain a grip on what little was left? A flicker of doubt crossed his mind. What could a girl so young, with nothing to her name, possibly want here? He hesitated, feeling a surge of instinct to protect his fragile world from the outside chaos. Yet that nagging feeling refused to fade. The grim reality of his ranch crumbling, profit slipping away, haunted him. Perhaps she held a key, an unopened door to possibilities he had buried deep within. Could he risk letting her in? "Got work to do," he grumbled, eyeing her with calculated distance. But instead of backing off, she stepped forward, determination flickering in her blue eyes. "I can help," she said simply, and against his better judgment, the pitch of loneliness pushed him to reluctantly agree. As they worked side by side, Hank began to see something in her that sparked memories of his own youth, dreams once alive, ambitions snuffed with grief. But in Lily, he found a reflection of resilience, a revolt against stagnation that he'd buried under layers of sorrow. She introduced him to sustainable farming techniques, challenging the traditions he clung to like a lifeline. "It's not always about what you've known," she'd say, her voice thriving with passion. He listened, grappling with feelings of pride and unease. Could he adapt, after years of honoring the past? Each smile she shared pierced through his stone-hearted resolve, igniting a blend of hope and fear, a longing for the future clashing against the loyalty he felt for the women he lost. Just when glimmers of revival began to shine, the looming specter of a corporate developer threatened to snatch the ranch from under him, eager to trade land etched in memory for profit ticking ever closer. Hank's stomach churned. This wasn't just a threat to his life's work. It felt like a direct assault on everything his late wife cherished. It was a conflict of being rooted in his legacy versus yielding to the harsh mechanics of progress. That day, after they uncovered a plan against the developer, Hank's heart raced with realization. This might demand more than just his loyalty. It would require a leap into an unknown future alongside Lily, a future unshaped yet promising. As he prepared for an imminent meeting that could seal both their fates, anxiety twisted tightly within him, unsure if he could sacrifice everything he'd once held dear to save their burgeoning bond. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Every breath felt heavy, overwhelming as he clenched his jaw, teetering on the edge. Could he really stand up against the tide of profit-driven greed and safeguard not only the ranch, but the undeniable connection spiraling with Lily? The stakes weighed heavily as he recalled her ingenuity. Would it be enough? The room would grow silent before the verdict, one that held not just his land, but the dawning realization of what it meant to choose love over loss. What was he willing to lose to save so much more? The meeting loomed large in Hank's mind, overshadowing the sun's unforgiving heat. He paced the wooden floor inside his modest ranch house, the old planks creaking beneath his weight as if echoing his restless thoughts. Each step felt like a countdown, a constant reminder of the impending confrontation with the corporate developer. The papers scattered across his table, evidence of the developer's plans, lay there mocking him. Plans that twisted his legacy into mere figures on a spreadsheet. Security versus progress, stability versus ambition. It was a false choice that left him deeply unsettled. He only glanced at them, his heart heavy and resolute. The thought of losing the ranch felt like losing a piece of himself. Then there was Lily. Her optimistic chatter had filled days that had once been colored by emptiness, grounding him with a purpose he'd thought lost. As he envisioned her standing alongside him, her enthusiasm unfazed by his quiet fears, he questioned whether he could shoulder this burden alone anymore. She believed in them, in the ranch, in a future that seemed increasingly uncertain. The door creaked open, breaking his spiraling thoughts. Lily stepped inside, her hair tousled and dirt smudged on her cheeks from a day's work in the fields. "Ready to make our stand?" she asked, her eyes sparkling like the clear Montana skies. Hank's breath caught in his throat. Her unwavering spirit was infectious, but it intensified his internal battle. "You have no idea what's at stake." "Maybe not," she replied, unfazed. "But I know what we can achieve if we fight together." The warmth of her belief wrapped around him, stirring a confidence he hadn't felt in years. Perhaps he needed to embrace the disruption she represented. The thought of coupling her audacity with his experience ignited a flicker of hope within him. "I just don't want to let you down," Hank admitted, the vulnerability of the words striking him as the sun settled lower in the sky. "You won't," she reassured, her fingers brushing over the plans he had laid out. "But we need a strategy. If we can show the community what's really at stake, we can rally support and make sure those greedy bastards don't walk away with our land." Hank leaned on the counter, the weight of responsibilities pressing down relentlessly. Having lived on the ranch his whole life, he had always been self-reliant. He wasn't accustomed to relying on others, least of all a young girl who embodied everything he had once been. But he had reached a threshold. Something had to change. Together, they started mapping out a plan, brainstorming ways to shine a light on the ranch's importance, not just to them, but to the greater community. Hank found himself captivated, jotting down ideas as Lily breathed life into each suggestion. It struck him then, this wasn't simply about land, it was about legacy, community, and their futures intertwined. Each idea built upon another, each possibility revealing a hidden talent within him. Hank realized he could be more than a simple rancher. He could be an advocate, a leader in a fight that felt larger than just his personal struggles. And with Lily beside him, this new chapter no longer felt like something to dread, but a challenge to embrace. As dawn broke over the next horizon, Hank felt a renewed sense of purpose swell within him. They were ready to fight. But just as the vitality surged through him, the echo of a knock reverberated through the air. The developer had arrived earlier than expected, with his entourage of suits and sharp smiles. Hank's heart raced. This was it, the moment that would test all he'd learned from Lily, all he'd grappled with since losing his wife. Would he embrace the unknown and stand for what mattered, or would he let the past shadow his future? He could already feel the stakes rising. It was time to find out what he was really made of. The moment Hank opened the door, he was met with the sterile scent of expensive cologne and the polished smiles of the developer's team. Each suit seemed a stark contrast against the rustic backdrop of his ranch, an affront to everything he held dear. Hank's grip tightened on the door. He felt exposed, vulnerable, yet invigorated by a steadfast clarity. "Mr. Thornton," the developer's voice cut through the air, as smooth as it was insincere. "We're eager to discuss the future of your land." Hank's heart raced, words clawing at the back of his throat. Any acceptance of their proposed plans felt like a betrayal to the life he'd built. But he refused to let his trepidation paralyze him. "Let's get started then," he said, surprising himself with the confidence he mustered. The group shuffled into the living room, taking over the space with their sleek gadgets and high-tech presentations. As they spread maps across the coffee table, Hank struggled to keep his composure. Everything they spoke about, development, luxury, growth, felt hollow. He remained rooted in the knowledge that this was more than just land to him. It was generations of hard work and countless memories. "What would you say to a premium offer for the rights to your ranch?" The developer persisted, undeterred by the tightness in Hank's jaw. He tossed numbers and promises like glittering baubles, but they baked into insincerity as Hank processed their implications. "Money doesn't hold a candle to what this place means to me," Hank replied, each word punctuated with conviction. The enthusiasm in Lily's voice echoed in his mind, urging him to stand firm. "Ah, sentiment is charming, but businesses must adapt. Wouldn't you agree?" The developer smiled, feigning understanding as he leaned back with an air of superiority. Hank fought to stay grounded. "Business doesn't exist without people, and this ranch serves more than just my needs. It nurtures a legacy." He saw the slightest flicker of surprise in their eyes, perhaps from recognizing that he, a simple rancher, was standing up to them. What transcended his anguish was the realization that the confrontation was not solely about his land. It was about self-worth. As the discussions droned on, Hank began to visualize his role more clearly. He could no longer be a passive observer in his life story. A flicker of strategy ignited within him. What if he wielded the passion of his community to challenge their greed? Conversations with neighbors, gatherings around bonfires, they all held potential. Transforming this moment into action was critical, not just for himself, but for Lily, the ranch, and those who relied on it. The more he spoke, the more resolute he became. He could invoke their senses, challenge their morals, remind them of the history they aimed to erase. The tide was shifting. He felt it. After the meeting ended and the men retreated with their polished smiles chipped, Hank leaned back against the counter, breathing heavily. He had held his ground, but more than that, he had begun to see the contours of a greater fight, a fight he knew he had to share with Lily. As dusk descended, Hank felt the weight of what lay ahead. His structure, built over decades, stood vulnerable but alive with the simmering energy of potential. "Tomorrow," he whispered to himself, "I will rally the community." Resolved, he grabbed a pen and paper, jotting down names of those who cherished the ranch as he did. The adrenaline electrified his thoughts, and realization hit him. He was not just a man defending a piece of earth, he had transformed into a leader. The phone buzzed on the counter, jolting him from his reflection. It was Lily, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. "Hank, I have an idea that could really make our message resonate." His heart quickened. What he didn't know was that her idea would introduce an unexpected ally into their fight. He took a deep breath, anticipation swirling within him. Tomorrow would not just be about fighting for the ranch. It would redefine his purpose, his life, and perhaps even his relationship with Lily. As he answered the phone, a swell of determination surged through him. The real challenge was only beginning. Hank hung up the phone, his mind racing with the potential of Lily's idea. The prospect of action sent ripples of excitement through him, laced with the seriousness of their mission. He pushed aside half-formed doubts, grappling with the weight of responsibility now resting squarely on his shoulders. Who knew where this path might take him? The night wore on, filled with restless thoughts and the sounds of crickets serenading the moonlit ranch. In the quiet, Hank found clarity. He recalled the stories his grandfather told him, of the struggles it took to carve their legacy from untamed land. Each tale ignited a spark in his heart, forging resilience in the trials ahead. The next morning, armed with a renewed sense of purpose, Hank set out toward the bakery on Main Street. As he walked, he observed the wiry branches of the old oak tree lining the road. Future generations would climb its sturdy limbs, much like he had. He could feel the weight of time, a testament to continuity and community, pushing him forward. Inside the bakery, the scent of fresh bread enveloped him like a warm hug. Familiar faces greeted him, and he exchanged pleasantries with Mrs. Dawson, who had supplied him with pastries since he was a kid. But camaraderie soon yielded to the urgency of his mission. "I need your help," he said, the gravity of his voice slicing through the morning noise. With each person Hank spoke to, he shared not just the threat looming over his ranch, but also the dreams and history that formed the bedrock of their existence. Soon, spirited discussions turned into heated conversations. Voices rose in protest against the idea of losing their home to faceless developers. Hank was no longer simply a rancher but a catalyst, a vessel for collective hope and fierce determination. He sensed a shift in the room, a tide turning. As the group's passion ignited, Hank noticed a few familiar faces murmuring their support. This was their fight too, intertwined with his own. The deeper he delved into their conversations, the more he uncovered his knack for leadership, coalescing ideas and fortifying resolve. As days melded into nights, plans began to take shape. Flyers spread through town like wildfire, boldly announcing a meeting to discuss the ranch's future. Each passing day meant gathering more allies, fortifying his network, and honing his message. Hank found himself strategizing like a general preparing for battle, the weight of responsibility now an empowering force. But the energy was not without its challenges. As he planned, whispers of doubt slipped into his mind. He questioned his qualifications and the feasibility of success. Was he prepared to face the giants of development and secure the legacy of his family? Then one late afternoon, as Hank was mapping out their strategies on paper, an unexpected visitor arrived. Ruth, his former high school debate team champion. With her sharp wit and persuasive language, Hank felt the shadows of uncertainty graze against him like passing clouds. "Why fight this battle halfway?" she said, leaning over his notes. "If you're going to challenge them, do it fiercely." Her fervor ignited another spark within him. Together, they brainstormed methods to amplify their cause. Ruth's experience taught him about rhetoric and engagement, and Hank soaked in her every word. As they stood, the notebook sprawled out before them. A plan began to emerge, one that didn't just aim to protect the ranch, but showcased its value to the community and beyond. However, as excitement entwined with fear, Hank couldn't shake the sense that the toughest battles were yet to come. He paused, tapping the pencil against his chin. "Ruth, what if they come with a counteroffer? What would happen then?" Her direct gaze met his. "Then you'll need to be ready. Your strength lies in your conviction. Use it." Hank processed her words carefully. His confrontation with the developer was not an isolated incident. It was a prelude to a grander confrontation, one requiring not only personal resolve, but allies by his side. He was becoming aware of the vast resources at his disposal, the land, the community, and a growing network of support. It was exhilarating, yet the anxiety of the upcoming fight hovered ominously over him. Could he lead them to victory, or would he falter under the weight of expectations? Determined to embrace the challenge, he shared his newfound momentum with Lily. Hank knew then that their next steps would not just affect the ranch, but reshape who he became. As he turned off the lights for the night, he whispered an uncharacteristic promise to himself. "Tomorrow, I will face them with the strength I'm starting to find." But the clock kept ticking, and somewhere in the recesses of his mind, a question lingered. What unexpected betrayal or revelation awaited him just around the corner? Hank awoke with the dawn, tension still coiling in his gut like a tightly wound spring. The sunlight filtering through his curtains felt foreign, illuminating a world he was now determined to fight for. He sat on the edge of his bed, thoughts spinning like the blades of a windmill. What would today bring? Could he truly stand against the developers? He made a quick breakfast, deliberately avoiding the usual distractions of television or music, wanting the stillness to guide his focus. Each bite was a reminder of the grounding force of home, the eggs from his hens, the bread from the bakery. He made a mental note to invite Mrs. Dawson to the meeting tonight. Her support would reinforce their cause in ways a flyer never could. He arrived at his ranch to find familiar faces waiting, each one a thread in the fabric of his stand against adversity. They gathered around the wooden table, curiosity and apprehension evident in every eye. Hank took a breath, taking in the weight of their expectations. He wasn't just speaking for himself anymore. He was their voice, their hope. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his heart racing with urgency. "This is about more than just land. It's about our way of life." The words flowed more easily than he anticipated as he spoke with raw honesty, detailing the threats against their community's roots. He shared personal anecdotes, the joy of summer BBQs, kids playing in the fields, the heritage borne by generations that couldn't slip into the grasp of cold developers. As he talked, his confidence blossomed. He could see the change in their expressions, doubt transforming into resolve. The room was thick with determination. They began to share their own stories, the history that braided them together. "Think of the generations before us," Hank continued, pausing to gauge the energy in the room. He had never felt so connected to others, the rippling change stirring something deep within him. They fought for everything we have today, didn't they? It's our turn now to fight back. Lily raised her hand, an eager spark in her eyes. We should host an event, something big. The whole town should know what's at stake. Ideas cascaded, inflating the atmosphere with hope and fervor. Hank felt lighter, the doubts that once clouded his mind now lifting. Each suggestion reflected a shared commitment to defend their heritage, igniting his passion more than he thought possible. By the end of the meeting, many were ready to step up, to help in ways they never had before. Ruth was brilliant in her enthusiasm, suggesting creative social media strategies while others began populating her campaign. Hank reveled in a sense of purpose, the cloud of doubt temporarily banished. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Hank stepped outside to gather his thoughts, the golden glow washing over him. It dawned on him then, his battle wasn't just against developers. It was an internal struggle against his identity. He had always seen himself as just a rancher, but now he was evolving, shedding layers of self-doubt with each decisive step. But just as exhilaration began to fill his chest, a shadow of uncertainty began to seep back. What scheme would the developers concoct, and how would he face them? Did he have the necessary cunning to navigate the political landscape that loomed, a game he had never asked to join? As he pondered, a car turned into his driveway, dark and sleek, an ominous presence that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The developers had arrived. The moment of confrontation was descending upon him. The clock was ticking. With a pounding heart, he took a deep breath, preparing to advocate not just for his land, but for the person he was becoming. Would he have what it took to defy those trying to erase his past? As he stepped toward the approaching vehicle, determination coursed through his veins, an undeniable force urging him forward, ready for the fray that awaited. Hank felt his pulse quicken as he neared the sleek car, its tinted windows obscuring the occupants within. Doubt mingled with resolve, each step heavy with the ghost of reluctance and the thrill of newfound courage. The driver's door swung open, revealing a polished young man in an immaculate suit. "Mr. Thompson," the man said, extending a hand with a confident smile that felt rehearsed. "Eric Walsh, representing Silver Development." The name struck Hank like a bell tolling ominously. He had heard whispers of this firm's ruthless tactics and unchecked ambition. Hank hesitated. "What do you want?" His voice, although steady, felt like a fragile echo against the advancing tide of anxiety. "Let's not skirt around the issue. We're here to discuss our intentions for this land." Eric's facade was unyielding. He exuded the kind of self-assuredness that felt almost predatory. "The community is at a crossroads. Perhaps it's time to plan for progress." "Progress?" Hank scoffed, the word hanging in the air like a bitter taste. "This land has been part of our lives for generations. We're not looking to build luxury condos or shopping malls." "Understandable," Eric replied, shifting his weight slightly. "But you must see the future. Development will bring jobs and revenue. It's inevitable, Hank. The question is whether you'll be part of it or stand in the way. We can offer compensation, substantial compensation." Hank's stomach twisted. It wasn't about money. It was about identity. This was his home, not a financial transaction. He said, "It's not just land. It's our history, our memories. You can't put a price on that." A flicker of annoyance crossed Eric's face, quickly masked by a disarming grin. "You'd be surprised what people do for money, Hank. I encourage you to reconsider." The pressure behind Eric's words weighed heavily. What plan did the developers have up their sleeves? Hank realized he needed to confront not only Eric but also the internal demons that reared their heads whenever threats loomed close. A battle was dawning, not only with the developers but also within himself. "Tell me," Hank began, steel threading through his voice, "what happens if I refuse your offer?" Eric's expression shifted subtly. The cockiness faded and revealed a glimmer of frustration. "You'll find out soon enough, but let's not make this personal." Hank detected the challenge, a flicker of fire igniting behind his determination. He wouldn't back down. He would fight for his home and, in the process, claim the newfound identity he was carving out for himself. This battle meant more than defending land. It was about accepting his strength. As the men exchanged hardened gazes, Hank felt a wave of clarity wash over him. The land represented not just heritage but the resilience he was discovering within himself. He would transform into a figure of resistance, no longer just a rancher, but a guardian of their way of life. "Then come back when you're ready to talk about preserving our home rather than destroying it," he said, standing tall against the encroaching anxiety. "Let's see where this leads us." Eric's smile faltered, replaced by a calculating expression. "Very well, Hank, but this isn't over." As the car pulled away, Hank stood his ground, feeling the weight of the decision he'd just made coursing through his veins. Every fiber of his being knew this was just the beginning. The fight would grow more complex, but he wasn't the man he used to be. He had allies now, support from the community, and he was preparing to embrace the role of a leader. With a fierce determination stewing inside him, Hank realized he had to strategize. There would need to be more than just grit. He had to learn the game of negotiation and influence, dipping his toes into the world of advocacy. What skills might he uncover? What methods could he employ to outthink the developers? And most importantly, how far would he go to protect everything he cherished? The stakes had been raised, and the fight was on. Hank could feel it deep within him. The transformation was underway. Yet he also sensed the looming shadow of complexity ahead. Would he rise to the challenge, or would he falter as the world he fought for pressed on? Hank sat at his kitchen table, the early morning light slicing through the window like a spotlight on his thoughts. The remnants of last night's confrontation with Eric Walsh replayed in his mind, each moment as vivid as the daylight that warmed the room. He had challenged a professional in a suit, an ardent representative of the ruthless silver development. Was this the same man who had once hesitated to voice his opinions in town meetings? The stark contrast made him chuckle, a sound tinged with disbelief. The weight of the land rested heavily on his shoulders, but with it came a newfound determination. He needed to prepare himself not just for what lay ahead with Eric, but for the looming collision of values, identity, and self-worth. Hank envisioned strategies that went beyond knee-jerk reactions. He needed a plan. He resolved to learn, absorb, and emerge as the protector of what truly mattered. He reached for a notepad, its pages blank and inviting. The act of planning infused him with energy. First, he would delve into the intricacies of advocacy. Understanding the landscape of corporate development was just as important as comprehending the emotions tethered to his land. He brainstormed lists of potential allies, local historians, environmentalists, community leaders, all of whom could lend their voices to the cause. It was time for his voice to resonate beyond personal walls and echo in the hearts of those who shared his memories. Visions of rallying support fueled his resolve, and soon he began drafting a community meeting, inviting others to share their stories, their stakes in the land. Laying out brochures, filling rooms with passion, and drawing on shared histories had the potential to galvanize an entire community. Hank could foresee the kind of energy that could arise from honest discussions. Stories woven from decades spent on the land could spark not just memories, but tangible action. His thought process took a turn as he contemplated communication tactics. What if Eric and Silver Development lacked the personal touch so many stakeholders cherished? The more Hank considered his position, the clearer it became that he needed to counter the corporate coldness with heartfelt narratives. Stories they couldn't dismiss with reckless efficiency. The sound of a truck rumbling by jerked Hank from his thoughts, reminding him of the urgency of his mission. He could no longer sit idly by, merely reacting as a victim of circumstance. It dawned on him that he could shape the narrative, could expose the risks that such developments posed to the environment and the community's core. Though he felt a shroud of uncertainty, tinged with an exhilarating fear, Hank also sensed a blossoming of confidence nurtured by his writing and organizing efforts. The day wore on, each task feeding into the encouraging cycle of growth. He reached out to a couple of local journalists, offering to share his story and cast light on the urgency of preserving their land. The idea of being featured in an article sparked something deep within him. What if the truth resonated further than he had ever imagined, igniting broader support? That night, sitting on his porch under a blanket of stars, Hank reflected deeply on the implications of his transformation. Clarity glimmered. While he had spoken boldly in front of Eric, the ultimate battle lay ahead when he faced the scrutiny of greater forces, both from within and without. What if he stumbled? What if he couldn't rally the support he desperately needed? His nerves threatened to bubble up again, yet beneath them lay an undercurrent of ambition, buoying him onward. This fight could shape his destiny, force him to embrace the roles he had shunned for far too long. Was he ready to confront not just the developers, but the shadows of doubt within himself? With a renewed sense of purpose, he resolved to stand firm. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities to lay the groundwork for something monumental, a shift from merely being a rancher to becoming a true advocate for his land. As he settled into the quiet of the night, a single thought echoed through his mind. The moment of truth awaited him. Would he rise and challenge the system, or swallow his fear and let it all slip away? Hank awoke to a dawn that felt unusually charged. A palpable energy coursed through the air, compelling him to rise with purpose rather than routine. The past day had transformed not just his resolve but his entire perception of his role amid the brewing storm. As he moved about his kitchen, brewing coffee, he deliberated on how to enact the changes he had envisioned. The first step was clarity, articulating his personal mission for preservation in a concise manner that would resonate profoundly with anyone who heard it. He needed a narrative that wove together both his history with the land and the stakes of its future. In his mind, it became a tapestry of memories. Childhood summers spent exploring creeks, the first time he had seen the sprawling pastures turn to gold in autumn, the laughter shared on family gatherings as the sun set behind the ridge. Once he had his message firm in mind, Hank turned to the expansive world of communication. He knew that the way he presented his fight could either enhance or weaken his cause. With his notepad in front of him, he began to sketch out key talking points, each one more resolute than the last. Engaging emotional storytelling would be crucial, but it needed to be paired with undeniable facts about the dangers of unchecked development. He jotted down statistics about habitat destruction, water quality impacts, and the decline of local wildlife. Knowledge was power, and he would wield both. By midday, he felt himself change in the reflection of his actions. Hank took a leap, reaching out to a former high school colleague who had become a prominent environmental journalist. Dylan's name flickered in his mind like a beacon of hope. Their conversations had always drawn on the complexities of identity, influence, and the intertwining paths of personal and environmental responsibility. "Hank, it's been ages!" Dylan greeted him, his enthusiasm immediate. They exchanged pleasantries, but Hank quickly steered the dialogue toward his plea. He sketched the picture of the land's plight while intertwining his familial narrative. "I plan to host an event for people to share their connections to this land. Maybe you could cover it?" he proposed, a blend of uncertainty and hope coloring his voice. To his surprise, Dylan's interest was piqued. "I'd love to help," he said. "But we need a pitch that really digs in. Make it personal, make it impactful. People need a reason to care." With that simple suggestion, a spark ignited in Hank's mind. He required not just coverage, but a way to mobilize public sentiment. Their conversation swirled with possibilities and ignited a fervor in Hank. By the end of their call, he had expanded his network with a journalist who could help package his narrative in a compelling way. Each connection felt like a thread strengthened in the fabric of his advocacy. As he hung up, he couldn't shake off the realization that he was no longer standing alone. He was becoming a node in a larger dream, new friendships anchored in common values. After devoting the afternoon to refining his message, Hank took a moment to breathe. The sense of urgency now blended seamlessly with optimism. This was no longer just about his land. It was a broader fight for values he believed in. A fight that invited others to join. Yet a tinge of anxiety wormed its way back into his thoughts. Could he sustain this momentum? Would the fear ever fully dissipate? He needed to take that risk of stepping into the known chaos, uncertain but resolute. Dusk settled in, and as he gazed out onto the land blending into shadows, Hank understood his next move clearly. It was not merely to develop a call for action, but to become the voice amplifying every heart tethered to the rhythms of this land. He would devise a strategy that combined advocacy with emotional appeal, challenging the cold statistics of corporate promises. The evening drew close, but his journey was just beginning. In that moment, the doubts that loomed felt less daunting than the potential ahead. Would he muster the courage to stand before others and articulate his vision? Would he withstand the pressure that was sure to come as he challenged the very essence of who he imagined himself to be? The answers beckoned with the promise of change, a challenge Hank could no longer ignore. Hank settled into a rhythm as dawn broke yet again, the moments of clarity nudging him closer to a revelation. The weight of expectation loomed over him, yet it spurred a sense of urgency he had never known. This wasn't merely a battle for land, it was a crucible for personal rebirth. He yearned to evolve beyond the man who had operated in the cocoon of silence and complacency. Today, he would not merely voice concerns. He would excavate the core of his beliefs and translate them into a potent narrative that could resonate beyond his secluded realm. In preparation for the day's conversations, Hank planned to reach out to community members who shared a stake in the land, the farmers, the wildlife enthusiasts, even the retirees who spent their days reminiscing about what it once was. He envisioned a candid dialogue, one where he would listen as much as he would speak. Encouraging openness would stir the embers of passion in their souls, igniting shared urgency tenfold. He found himself standing in front of the mirror, looking into the depths of his own reflection, grappling with self-doubt. Could he really inspire others to rally around a cause? The mirror seemed to retaliate with an indifference that mirrored his fears. Soon, he found himself pacing around his living room, muttering affirmations. He was not just a rancher, he was a messenger, a steward destined to shepherd his community into realizing the stakes at hand. As mid-morning slipped into afternoon, Hank sent out invitations for informal meetings scattered throughout the week. With each email he drafted, he felt an unexpected thrill, a subtle awakening of the confidence he had long laid dormant. As words poured into the keyboard, he articulated his story, merging his cherished memories of the land with the present-day threats hovering like storm clouds. Calling on old friendships, he knocked on doors he once hesitated to approach. Each conversation chipped away at an old identity he no longer recognized, cascading into a vibrant sense of agency. They were hesitant at first, skeptical that this lone rancher could incite any real change. Yet Hank's growing conviction slowly thawed their doubts. He shared personal anecdotes, revealing vulnerabilities that were often wrapped in silence. A family story here, his dreams there. At his first meetup, held under the sprawling oak in the park, Hank felt nerves coil in his stomach like a storm-gathering force. They arrived, one after another, each person a new possibility weaving into his narrative. Faces, once strangers, seemed to pulse with life and passion. One woman, a local teacher, recounted lessons about ecosystems and sustainability, while another gentleman spoke of the animals that vanished from the land and with them, a piece of their shared heritage. Hank nodded, deeply absorbing their wisdom. This was their land too. The more he listened, the more evident it became that the connection each person had to the land was a thread waiting to be spun into a louder call for preservation. With every story shared, he fortified his resolve. The truth was powerful, and in telling it together, they could craft something transcendent. As darkness enveloped the park, the group disbanded, energized yet reflective. The connections made felt like fragile lace, woven together with dangers, yet illuminated by each participant's commitment. Hank lingered in the fading twilight, confronting an internal battle. The same question loomed. How far would he push this newfound motivation? Questions encircled him like fireflies on a warm summer's night. Would they stand with him when the pressure mounted? Would they remain steadfast against the looming threat of developers? As he gazed out into the darkening landscape, Hank felt branches of the unknown stretch out before him, calling him to explore paths illuminated by newfound allies. What would he do when the winds of opposition swept in, testing not just their resolve but his own? The time had come for Hank to confront the storm that awaited, both outside and within. Hank Collins stood at the edge of his ranch, the Montana landscape sprawling before him, a patchwork of green meadows and golden fields ready to be harvested. This was the land he had fought for, a land intertwined with his personal journey of transformation. Behind him, the successes and struggles of the past seemed like distant shadows. He had learned to embrace vulnerability as strength, to carve his path alongside the spirited young girl who had ignited a revolution within him. Weeks had passed since he had faced the developers. The community rallied, drawn together by Hank's voice, a conduit for their hopes and fears. What had once seemed an insurmountable wall now appeared as a series of stepping stones, each forged by the collective passion for preservation that now flowed like a river through the town. The meeting hall had been packed, each seat filled with faces, their eyes glimmering with determination as Hank unveiled his vision. "Together, we are the guardians of this land," he had declared, standing resolutely in front of the crowd, and they had responded as one, echoing his sentiments, their unified voices rising like a swell. "We will protect our heritage." The decision to confront the developer had stirred something deeper within him than a mere act of defiance. Hank had proven to himself that he could embrace change, adapt, and rise above the complacency that had shackled him for far too long. Each connection forged, each story shared, had enriched his resolve, transforming the loneliness he once harbored into a warmth crafted from community spirit. Months of planning had culminated into a powerful message that echoed beyond his ranch. He had invited journalists, local activists, and historians to create a narrative that demanded attention. "This is about our identity, our stewardship of the land, and our legacy," he reiterated at the town meeting, his heart full of purpose. The developer, initially cocky and dismissive, had been taken aback by the community's fervor. Their carefully designed plans crumbled in the face of passionate resistance. Hank had not just defended his ranch, he had reclaimed his narrative and transformed into a figure of hope. Now looking at the horizon, Hank felt the weight of pride settle deep in his chest. The ranch was secured, a sanctuary not only for him but for generations to come. Lily, equally invested in the fight, had become more than just a friend. She had evolved into a trusted partner, her youthful audacity an indispensable force in their journey. Together, they had hosted workshops to teach sustainable practices, bringing awareness to the locals about the importance of conservation and community. "Can you believe what we've achieved?" she had asked one day, her eyes shining with ambition. "Yeah, but it's just the beginning," he'd replied, the echo of possibility lingering in the air. C'est quoi? The bond that had formed between Hank and Lily was one of mutual respect and shared aspirations. She reminded him of the passions he once held dear, and together they nurtured the concepts of sustainability, expanding the landscape of their ranch into a beacon for change. The success of their initiatives echoed beyond their vicinity, strengthening their roles as advocates for rural preservation in a world pivoting toward industrialization. The culmination of their efforts led to Hank receiving an award for community engagement and environmental stewardship from the town council, a recognition that validated not just his principles, but also affirmed the connections made through shared purpose. The wood plaque gleamed under the morning sun like a badge of honor, and in that moment he came to realize just how far he had come. "That's your doing too, you know," Hank said to Lily, holding the award in his grasp, the sheer weight of it reflecting the truth that they were forged together in the flames of struggle. As they stood together, a sense of fulfillment radiated through him, bathing him in a warm glow of gratitude. Hank had turned inward, facing not just the external challenges but the storms brewing in his heart. He had fiercely embraced change, and in the process, he had emerged as a leader, not just of the ranch, but of his own life. Today, he exhaled a profound breath. No longer was he the man shackled by loss. He was an advocate, a steward, and a source of empowerment. He had conquered his fears, proven his resilience, and stood tall against the impending tides, equipped not just with experience, but with the deep understanding of what it meant to belong, to fight, to hope, and to love. It was time to spread the message even further, to connect those who still felt voiceless amidst the noise of progress. The journey ahead brimmed with possibilities, and Hank, now filled with confident purpose, was ready to seize every moment. As he took one last look at the sprawling fields, he made a silent vow. "This is our home. I will safeguard it." The story of transformation had not ended. It had merely reached a new chapter, one where hope blossomed amid the fears, and a legacy was born anew. Now is your moment to be a part of this journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support our community. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending. Your voice matters. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now and help us continue uplifting stories of personal triumph. Don't wait even one more second to share.